Hello Internet, this is the one and only. Today I'm repairing my LifeCycle C1 exercise bike upright, and we're just gonna get rolling here. There's an off issue, an off error code, and I'm gonna show you how to fix this and how to recalibrate the machine. So first off, you saw I removed the let's say right side screws if you're sitting on the bike, and now I'm switching over to the left side screws. You only have to get it's 4 screws on the right side, and on the left side here is where most of the screws are. We need to take the left side shroud off, um, and so you're going to see me pulling these screws out. Now these bottom screws that I'm working on right now are long screws, and so just keep that in mind for reassembly. These deeper hole screws are always short screws, because you're going to notice that there's really two types of screws, long and short. So here you got that screw out. Now I'm just going to take the plastic shrouds off and set them aside. This gasket on the gasket pull is going to fall down, so just keep an eye on that for when you're going to do reassembly. We'll have to reposition that. Moving up to the front shroud here, we got to take this side off. Again, just 2 screws. We did the same 2 screws on the other side. These ones are short with a washer, so just keep that in mind again for reassembly. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to lift this off and just set it to the side. We're not going to fully take it apart or off because it's not necessary for this repair. If we wanted to take both sides of the shroud off, maybe we would, but less disassembly means less reassembly, and therefore means time saved. This next section of the video is going to be a lot of removing Phillips head screws from the shroud. And what you're going to notice is I'm going to take my extended Phillips head and I'm going to kind of fish it into the hole and get it all lined up before I put it back in the drill or my power screwdriver, if you will, to loosen up the screws. This is just so I don't strip out the head of the screw. You're going to notice that a lot of these screws are going to be the smaller kind, and so I'm going to speed this up and attempt to slow it down for every screw. Not all the screws fall out or came out with the Phillips head, so you might not see a screw come out. They'll come out after the shroud pulls off, and we'll just gather them together. So now it's time to take off the crank arm. Just get yourself a standard screwdriver and undo the dust cap there. And then as you're going through, we're going to see looking for the right size socket, and it's a 12 millimeter socket. Um, and just get it on there. Mine was looser this time because I'd already taken this arm off before. If yours is a little tighter, don't be afraid to get like a breaker bar or some more leverage on it, and kind of have someone hold the other arm or prop it in order to break the bolt loose. Then just remove the bolt, as you see here. Now that I've got the bolt out, I'm going to set that aside here and grab my crank puller tool. This is a Park Tools crank puller. I've had some experience with some ones on Amazon that were much less quality, and this one was a good one. The other option you can do if you don't have this tool is to go to your local auto parts warehouse and buy a gear puller or one of those jaw-like devices, or a damper puller. Gear or damper puller, and use that. You could potentially grab it. It's not as good because you can scratch your crank arm and you may not get a really good grip because it's kind of an odd shape and there's not much grip surface there for a 3-arm damper puller to grab onto. So the key here with this bicycle crank puller from Park Tools or anything like it is to make sure you get it in all the way and bottomed out to the bottom of the crank arm. And to do that here, I needed a wrench, and so I'm going to go grab a wrench real quick. And then I ended up getting a pliers and putting that on just to tighten it all the way down and bottom it out in the crank arm. So here I got it all bottomed out. Now I'm just going to snug up the puller tool here to the square pin, and we can see it's still in pretty good. I don't have a lot of handle here, so it's a little bit of a struggle, so I apologize for the camera work. I've just got a phone mounted on my head, and you know, I was able to do this without taking off the pedal because that arm is short enough. The other option is if you had a ratchet, right, you wouldn't have to take off the pedal either. Anything to save work saves time. You see here, after a little bit of muscle, got it loose, and it's starting to come off. Real easy. It's just pushing against the square pin and pulling on the threads inside of the crank arm. Now it's off. You'll see here, I'll just remove my puller tool from the crank arm to get it ready for reassemble. Also, what you're going to notice is on the let's say crank pin, I put used a Sharpie, a silver Sharpie, to mark the top edge. That top edge aligns with the crank arm, and that helps me reorientate it with the other crank arm on the other side of the machine, so that they are always opposite of each other, and also keeps the wear surfaces the same on the square pin. So highly recommend marking your crank pin with a Sharpie or paint marker for easier reassembly. Getting into the nuts of the bolts of the machine here, we got our servo motor here. You can see it's pointing straight down with the wire. It should be, that wire at level 1 when the machine's off should be pointing all the way to the left, maybe slightly up. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to plug the machine back in and try to do a calibration on the machine and see if it follows, and kind of diagnose this machine a little bit more. So to do this, you put it into manual mode, and you're going to change it from level 1 to level 20 and then back down to level 1 and see if the servo motor follows and resets itself. You see here it failed. It got an off code, which is the error code I've been getting, and while I'm doing this repair, I'm going to replace the servo motor. Here I want to show you one thing. This is how to tell if your machine is aligned and calibrated properly. You see that white plastic piece inside the green slot. And then there's two fine lines here that I'm pointing to. That tip of that white piece inside the green slot is supposed to be between those two lines. So let's get started with disassembly here. First we're going to loosen up the cable on the brake cable, if you will, and allowing us to get a little bit more room. We're going to pull it out of the blue servo motor housing, and then ultimately undo it from the servo motor by pulling it around the wheel and out. So the brake side came a little loose, and I'll have to fix that later, but ultimately I'm just going to pull that cable out and let it hang here and leave it as be. I'm checking the quality of the cable here to see if it needs to be replaced, and it looks like it's okay, maybe a little bit stretched, so further down the road this might be the next piece that has to be repaired. Here there's just two screws that hold the servo motor in. I'm able to get a nice shot with this drill extension to undo this one, and actually I'm able to get in to the other one with the same drill extension. It's a little tighter, just a little tighter. Here we're at a size. I'm going to unhook the electrical first, get that out of the way before I remove that final screw. So it's just push on the two tabs on the side and then pull the two connectors apart. It was a little too hard for my fingers, so I used my locking pliers and opened them up. Channel pliers, excuse me, not locking, and opened them up to grab it and lightly press on it and then pull it out. What you see here is I finally settle on a average size Phillips head screwdriver that fits that screw well to try to get this tighter fit screw out. It works fine, and get it out. Ultimately you'll see when I do the reinstall I can get at it with the drill. But I didn't realize at this time. It just seems really seems like a really tight fit. So always good practice. I'm just going to compare the size, shape, connectors, and obviously part numbers of the actuators. I did this out of a part manual. I just wanted to understand the difference here. You can see the one on the left is a newer one, and it's got a newer manufacture date than the one on the right. Looks like there's been some part number changes. So that's a good sign. Maybe this won't fail again in a few years. I think this one lasted like maybe somewhere around 7 years, so that's pretty good with daily use. So no complaints here. This next section here, we're just going to reinstall this servo motor, and so I'm going to speed it up for you, and I'll be back with you once we get at least one screw in. Right, so here you see I can get in there with the drill. I just nudged them up to like 4 foot-pounds, about wrench tight, hand tight. Um, and I'm about to make a big mistake here. I try to hook the brake cable back up. You'll notice that the actuator comes to you in position 20, and position 20 is indeed the easiest way to hook the actuator up. So what you need to do here is you're going to end up putting that end of the cable into the hole, and what you want to do is go ahead and pull on that cable with your hands. You should be able to do it. It's not too hard, and give yourself some extra slack, and then route it enough to get your the end of the cable into that hole while it's in level 20, and then go around the top to align it, and that'll save yourself a lot of trouble. I ended up plugging the machine in, turning it to level 1, then having to plug the machine in, turn it back to level 20, and unplug the machine while it was at level 20 to get it there. Huge mistake, time wasted that I could have saved. So I'm going to cut some of that out for you and speed up the rest, and so we get that cable into the slot. Alright, so we're all hooked up here with cable and everything. I just pointed out it's at level 20 right now, and we're going to plug in the machine, and it should go to level 1 after the console initializes. So let's see. Alright, here it's going, it's tightening. There you go, it made it all the way to level 1. What we can see here is it's not calibrated quite right. The white piece is a little too high. It's not within the 2 lines there on the green. And so we're going to um, increase the tension on the cable to bring that down in between the 2 green lines. So what you see me doing here is turning the tension counterclockwise to increase the tension, and then also creating the moving the set screw up to prevent it from rotating clockwise during use and loosening up. So once you get the tension right, move that set screw all the way up to block it from coming undone. And if you run out of screw length on this piece, then that means your cable is too stretched out and you'll need to replace the cable as well. Here we go, we're going to do the calibration right now. So moving it all the way up to 20 and then moving it back down to 0, making sure everything works quite right, or excuse me, back down to 1. And then we're going to recheck the tension there on the brake and make sure it's in between the 2 lines. We find that it is, and everything is a-okay. We are going to turn off the console here and then unplug the bike and start reassembling. Okay, so right here we're about to do the crank arm, and what we need to do here is get our torque wrench out. If you don't have a torque wrench, I highly recommend you get one. Just a cheap one from Harbor Freight or Ace Hardware or any hardware store will do. We're going to line up our crank arm as we had mentioned in the disassembly with the silver Sharpie mark that we did on the spindle. When we disassemble it, we're going to put the bolt in, and then we're going to get our torque wrench out. We're going to set our torque wrench anywhere between 25 foot-pounds and 32 foot-pounds. You can look up a square tapered spindle crank arm torque for a bicycle online, and that's where these numbers came from. So again, 25, between 25 and 32. I set mine at 30 for this video and kept it there, just because these click type of wrenches have some amount of error in them. Tightened them up. Also checked the torque on my other side. I believe last time I set it to like 25. I felt like it was a little loose when I disassembled, so I went and bumped it up to 30. And we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll never have to disassemble them again, but here we go. So I'm just hand threading the bolt in to make sure I don't cross thread, and then we'll torque it up here. Once we got the bike back in position where we can access the right side of the bike, we're going to put in the 4 remaining screws. There should be 2 screws with the washer for the front upper shroud, and then the 2 longer screws for the rear shroud on the 2 lower ones that go into the chassis. And then we're done. It's ready to go. So thank you for watching. I hope this video was helpful. If you found it helpful, please give me a subscribe and a like. I really appreciate it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.